My name is Sarah Miller, 38 years old, a university lecturer, living with my husband Adam Bennett, a renowned neurosurgeon, and our 3 children in a quiet town in North Carolina. Everyone thought we were the perfect model of an American family. But on the night the hospital celebrated its 20th anniversary, as Adam walked onto the stage to receive the Medical Ethics Icon Award, I stepped up to the banquet table and placed a thick folder right in front of him. He opened it and went pale. Inside were DNA results proving he was not the biological father of any of our children, along with evidence that he had deliberately switched sperm samples during fertility treatment to hide a deadly genetic disease. I had recorded and filmed everything. If the person you trusted most deceived you at the very root of your family, what would you do? Leave a comment, hit like and subscribe, because what happened after that was far more horrifying. I was born and raised in the suburbs of the American South, where streets were shaded by old oak trees, rows of red brick houses lined up neatly, and every summer brought a community festival. When I married Adam, I believed I had found a steady harbor. He was the kind of man every mother in the neighborhood wanted for her daughter, handsome, successful, well-spoken, and with skillful hands admired throughout the medical field. With a neurosurgery degree and a solid position at the largest hospital in the state, Adam often appeared in local newspapers, giving interviews about family values and the responsibility of the modern man. Every time I would sit in front of the screen, smiling proudly, thinking that's my husband. We bought a white 2-story house with a wooden porch swing and a straight white picket fence. In spring, I filled the yard with tulips and daisies. In winter, I decorated with pine wreaths and golden lights. Neighbors often told me that walking past our house felt like seeing a living postcard of the American dream. Our mornings began with the smell of fresh coffee from the kitchen, the children chattering as they searched for their school books, and the sound of Adam coming down the stairs in a crisp suit. He'd kiss me lightly, remind me to bundle up the kids, then drive the silver luxury car out through the gate, disappearing under the line of trees. But there were things outsiders never saw. I began noticing changes in Adam about 2 years ago. He worked later, and emergency calls from the hospital came more often at night. At first, I suspected nothing his profession was demanding, and surgeries could last all night. But then I realized those emergencies often happened on special days. My birthday, our daughter's piano recital, or the family's Christmas tree decorating night. One evening, I set the table with his favorite roast. The kids were seated and waiting, but Adam still hadn't come home. I called him, and his voice came through the line with distant background noise. "I'm still at the hospital, this case is complicated. Go ahead and eat without me." I simply said okay and hung up, a faint hollowness creeping in that I didn't want to name. From then on, the distance between us quietly grew. Dinner conversations revolved around the kids' school schedules, bills to pay, or events the hospital wanted me to attend. Gone were the long evenings talking about dreams and future trips. Sometimes, I suggested we go for a picnic or try a new restaurant in town. Adam would smile, but his eyes were somewhere far away. Another time, "I'm too busy this week." That another time never came. One October afternoon, with yellow leaves covering the walkway, I was arranging flowers in the living room when a package arrived. Inside was a framed family photo chosen for the community magazine's cover. In it, Adam had his arm around me, his other hand on our son's shoulder, smiling warmly. But I remembered how hard I had forced that smile. I remembered the coldness in his hand on my shoulder, no warmth at all. Another time, at a hospital fundraising gala, Adam stood on stage and introduced me. "Sarah gave up her teaching career to be by my side, raise our children, and create a peaceful home." The room applauded. I smiled reflexively. But inside, that word "gave up" echoed like a bitter reminder. I had loved my career but set it aside so he could fully focus on his. Now, I wondered, did that peaceful home even exist anymore? Or was it just a pretty coat of paint hiding the cracks? At night, when the kids were asleep, I would sit alone in my small study, listening to the clock tick. Adam sat downstairs, eyes fixed on his laptop, occasionally stepping outside to take calls. I asked, "Something going on at the hospital?" He answered curtly, "Just some administrative stuff." His voice no longer carried warmth, it was like a door slamming shut, keeping me out. I started noticing his eyes whenever a message came in. His phone would buzz, and he'd tilt away from me, his fingers moving quickly before setting it face down. I wasn't the prying type, but the change cut into me bit by bit. One weekend morning, we were getting the kids ready for the park. Adam said he needed to stop by the hospital first to check a patient's chart. I nodded, but as he left, I noticed a small suitcase in the backseat of his car. He had never brought a suitcase for hospital work. A chill of unease drifted through me like a winter wind across the porch. I told myself it could be extra clothes or preparation for an unexpected work trip. I wanted to believe that the man I had built my life with was still my anchor. But deep down, a steady tapping in my mind warned me that the perfect door of our family was about to open onto a truth I could never imagine. That morning was crisp, with autumn sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, lighting the breakfast table where I'd just folded a stack of towels. I carried the laundry basket upstairs to gather Adam's clothes. He had left less than an hour earlier in his familiar gray suit, saying he had an early hospital meeting. I opened the closet and took out his dark blue winter coat. Reaching into the pocket before washing it, my fingers touched something stiff, an airline ticket envelope. My heart skipped a beat as I read the bold print. Las Vegas. First class. 2 passengers. The departure date matched exactly when Adam had told me he'd be in Boston for a medical conference next week. I froze, the ticket trembling in my hand. A wave of heat and cold swept over me, forcing me to sit on the edge of the bed. Looking closer, the first passenger's name was Adam Bennett, and the seat beside him was blank, no name filled in. Dozens of theories rushed through my mind. Maybe a male colleague, maybe a special hospital guest, or someone I didn't want to think about. I told myself that jumping to conclusions would only hurt me more. I carefully put the ticket back as if I'd never touched it. That day, I went about my routine, taking the kids to school, preparing lectures, grocery shopping, but in my mind, the image of that ticket spread like an ink stain, growing darker by the hour. That evening, Adam came home late. When I walked into the living room, he was on his phone, fingers moving quickly. Seeing me, he placed it face down and said calmly, "Just checking tomorrow's surgery schedule." I smiled and asked softly, "Want me to make you some coffee?" He nodded without looking up. From that night on, I noticed his phone was always face down, now requiring a fingerprint instead of the usual 4-digit code. He often stepped out onto the balcony or into the garage to take calls, his voice so low I could only catch a few muffled words. One night, near midnight, I woke to the sound of the door quietly opening. Adam was walking out, phone glowing in his hand. I asked softly, "Where are you going?" He paused for a moment, then said, "Downstairs for some water." I listened to his footsteps, but instead of heading to the kitchen, they moved toward the study. The door closed, followed by a quick, hushed voice and a faint laugh. The next morning, I casually asked, "Who were you talking to last night? I thought you went for water." Adam chuckled. "A colleague on the night shift, asking my opinion on a tough case." That smile didn't reach his eyes, and in that moment, I realized I was standing in front of a wall he had started building between us. I didn't want to act rashly. I remembered my mother's words, "When you suspect, let the truth come to you. Don't chase it with a burning heart." So I chose silence, watching. In the days that followed, Adam suddenly became more conscious of his appearance. He changed his hairstyle, bought several new suits, and switched to a completely different cologne from the one he'd worn for years. When I said, "This scent is different, but it suits you," he simply replied, "Just changing things up a bit." One afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a notification. "New message, can't wait to see you in Vegas." Adam walked in right after, grabbed the phone, slipped it quickly into his pocket, and said as if nothing had happened, "I forgot my phone." I smiled. Didn't ask anything, but inside, pieces of a puzzle started falling into place in a way I never wanted. I began spending more time noticing the small changes. When we had dinner together, Adam would place his phone face down next to his plate. Whenever it buzzed, he'd lean away to check it, type a few words, then return to the conversation. Sometimes, when I asked about the conference in Boston, his answers were vague, never going into details. One evening I decided to test him. I said, I was thinking maybe I could go with you to Boston. While you're in meetings, I could visit some museums, and then we could have dinner together at night. Adam hesitated for a moment, then said, that wouldn't be convenient. The meeting schedule is packed. You'd just be bored. The answer sounded reasonable, but the flicker in his eyes said otherwise. Those signs were no longer small cracks, they had become gaps wide enough for the light of truth to shine through. And I knew if I kept going, I'd soon see the full picture. But at that time I kept a calm facade, because I understood that one wrong step could cost me the chance to uncover everything I needed to know. The business trip to Boston that Adam had been talking about all week finally came. That morning he left the house with a small suitcase and a brand new suit, kissing me quickly on the cheek like a mechanical habit. I stood at the door watching him, searching his face for any sign, but that smile was too polished to show a single crack. I had prepared myself for a few days alone with the kids. But on the afternoon of the second day, while I was teaching an online class, my phone buzzed nonstop. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but a strange urge made me pick up. A woman's voice came through, soft but clear. If you want to know where your husband is and what he's doing, go to the Silver Crown Hotel, room 1708. Tonight. Before I could ask anything else, the line went dead. I sat frozen for a few minutes, torn between suspicion and fear. Silver Crown. I knew that hotel. It wasn't in Boston. It was in Las Vegas, a place Adam had never mentioned. The image of 2 first-class plane tickets I'd found in his coat pocket suddenly became sharp and undeniable. I asked my neighbor to watch the kids, saying I had an urgent matter at school. I booked a plane ticket that same afternoon, heading to Las Vegas, barely remembering the flight at all. My mind kept repeating one question: who called me? And what would I find in that room? Las Vegas at night was ablaze with lights, music, and laughter spilling over the crowded streets. But for me, the brightness only made my anxiety harsher. I stepped into the Silver Crown lobby, my heart racing so fast I had to pause and breathe before approaching the front desk. I lied, saying I was a colleague looking for Adam Bennett in room 1708. The clerk smiled and gave me directions without a hint of suspicion. The elevator stopped on the 17th floor. The hallway was carpeted thickly, lit with warm yellow light, but it did nothing to calm the tremor in my hands. I stood before the door of room 1708, hearing faint laughter from inside, then the clink of glasses. Each heartbeat pounded like 100 beats in one. I knocked. The noise inside stopped, then footsteps approached. The door opened slightly, and I was face to face with a young woman, long brown hair, a white blouse draped loosely over her shoulders, and a short silk dress underneath. Her eyes widened briefly at the sight of me, then she quickly composed herself. Adam appeared behind her, still holding a glass of wine. His eyes showed no surprise, no panic, just a cold steadiness, as if he'd prepared for this moment. Sarah, go home. We'll talk at the house, he said in a flat, almost commanding tone. I looked at him, then at the woman. Who are you? I asked, my voice hoarse from restraint. She gave a faint smile. Emily Carter. I work with Adam at the hospital. I nodded, taking a step into the room, but Adam blocked my way. Sarah, this isn't the time, he said. Go home. I could smell a strange perfume in the air, one Adam had never brought home. On the table, an expensive bottle of wine sat half empty, next to 2 tickets for a famous Las Vegas show. Clothes were scattered about the room, there was no trace of a business trip. So the medical conference in Boston is held in Las Vegas now? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Adam frowned slightly and set down his glass. Sarah, don't make a scene here. I'll explain later. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of regret, but found only weariness and irritation. Explain? Or do you just want me to keep believing your lies? Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, watching like it was an entertaining play. I think you should listen to him. Standing in the hallway isn't a good look. I turned to her with a small smile. Thanks for the advice, but it seems you're part of this meeting too. Adam sighed, stepping back but still not moving aside. Sarah, I'm tired. Go home. We can't talk about this properly here. In that moment, I knew I wouldn't get the truth in that room. But the image of Adam and Emily standing together, their eyes, their unsettling calm, all of it etched deep into my memory. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. I turned away, walking quickly toward the elevator. As the doors closed, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. In the mirrored wall, the face staring back at me was no longer the woman who believed in a model family, but someone who had just watched the curtain hiding the truth be torn apart. When I stepped out of the hotel, I stood for a while amid the bustling crowd, feeling the desert's cool night air. The neon lights only made the emptiness inside me clearer. Adam hadn't even tried to hide it because he believed I wouldn't dare to shatter the shell we'd built for years. But he was wrong. I wouldn't just break it, I'd rip apart every brick until nothing could cover the truth. I returned home the next afternoon, while the kids were still at school. The house was as quiet as always, with a faint trace of morning coffee lingering. Adam was already home, sitting at the dining table in his work clothes, tie loosened. He didn't look surprised to see me walk in. He simply looked up, met my eyes, and said in a dry voice, "We need to talk." I hung up my coat, set down my bag, and sat across from him. "Go ahead." Adam exhaled, as if about to read a report. "I'll be direct. Emily and I are involved, not just as colleagues. And this hasn't been going on for just a day." I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "I think the feelings between us have been gone for a long time, Sarah," he said without blinking. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I want a divorce. I'll make sure you're financially supported so you don't have to worry about money." A cold emptiness spread through my chest. "Gone for a long time? Have you ever thought that maybe it's because you never tried to keep it?" Adam smirked faintly but without warmth. "Sarah, you stay home with the kids, teach a few part-time classes at the school, while I face pressure every day in the operating room. You can't understand the price I've paid to be where I am. Honestly, sometimes I feel like you just live off me." Each word was a knife twisting in my chest. For 15 years, I'd given up my full-time university job, put aside my research dreams so he could focus on his career. I was the one who handled every meal, every parent-teacher meeting, every bill. And now he reduced it all to living off him. I looked him straight in the eye. "Do you remember who gave up a PhD scholarship in New York to stay here because you got accepted into this hospital? Who took care of your mother for 3 months after her surgery so you could work without worry? Who stood by you every time you failed in difficult surgeries? Or do those things mean nothing now?" Adam crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair, his voice lower but still cold. "I'm not denying you've done a lot for the family. But what's between us can't be fixed. I need a new life. I want to be free. And that new life is with Emily?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just gave a slight shrug. "Emily understands me. She's young, full of energy, and doesn't constantly question or demand." Those words felt like a slap across my face. I realized this conversation wasn't about finding a way to mend things. He had made up his mind long before, and I was only being informed. I stood up, forcing my voice to stay calm. "If you've decided, then we'll speak through lawyers." "But Adam, don't think I'm going to let this end the way you want." Adam tilted his head slightly, narrowing his eyes. "Sarah, I'm trying to keep this civil. Don't turn it into a battlefield." I didn't respond. I just walked upstairs, leaving him sitting alone in the kitchen. When the bedroom door closed, I finally let myself take a deep breath. His words still rang in my head, but mixed in with them was a new resolve. I sat at my vanity, looking into the mirror. My face bore the traces of sleepless nights, but my eyes had a different kind of light. I knew I couldn't let emotions run the show now. If Adam was set on walking away, I needed to uncover everything that had been hidden. I opened my laptop and began searching for information about divorce procedures in North Carolina, child custody, asset division. I pulled out old bank statements, scanning through recent expenses. Immediately, a few strange transfers jumped out, large sums with no clear notes, withdrawn regularly every month. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend Laura asking how things were. I simply replied, "I think I'm going to need your help. A lot." That night, Adam slept in his office, saying he needed space. I didn't care. Instead of trying to pull him back, I quietly stepped into another role, the role of an observer, gathering every piece of the puzzle. I knew an affair alone wasn't enough. Adam was the kind of man who would protect his image at all costs, and I needed truth strong enough to shatter that facade. As I lay down, I thought of Emily's face at the hotel, that looked both defiant and curious. I wondered how much she really knew about Adam, and whether she understood she was stepping into a dangerous game. But to me, that didn't matter anymore. My goal now was to uncover everything Adam had kept buried, even things I had never dared imagine. And I knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. Laura came over on a Tuesday morning, bringing coffee and a look far more serious than usual. She was a lawyer, and my closest friend since college. We sat at the dining table, papers and laptops ready, the air so quiet we could hear the clock ticking. "Sarah, if you really want to know what Adam's been up to, you have to start with the money," Laura said firmly. "No one can hide everything forever if you follow the trail." I nodded, opening the folder of bank statements I'd downloaded the week before. We went through each expense. Groceries, home maintenance, the kids' tuition, everything looked ordinary. Then Laura pointed to one entry. "Transfer $75,000 Harbor West Holdings." I frowned. Harbor West Holdings. Never heard of it. Laura quickly searched online. The result was an LLC registered in Delaware, no website, no employee information, just a virtual office address. Shell company, Laura concluded. Why would Adam send money there? As we dug further, we found similar transactions every few months, 60,000, 85,000, even one for 120,000. Over the past 2 years, more than $500,000 had left our joint account and vanished into Harbor West Holdings. A chill ran down my spine. He's always saying we need to save, to cut back. So where is this money going? Laura's expression hardened. "Sarah, this could be money laundering. Or bribery. We need to find out who Harbor West is connected to." We kept following the trail. Some secondary accounts showed up in Adam's banking records, private accounts I'd never seen before. From Harbor West, the money moved to a bank in the Cayman Islands, then cycled through an account in Switzerland. Everything was done quietly, but not enough to escape a lawyer's eye. Cayman and Swiss accounts are often used to hide illicit money, dodge taxes, or stash bribes, Laura explained. Adam's not the first person to do this, but with his position, it's extremely dangerous. I tried to stay composed, but my mind was racing. Where was Adam getting this money? Was it from the hospital? Could he be involved in things I'd never imagined? That afternoon, while Adam was at the hospital, I went into his office. The room was as orderly as an operating theater, a polished wooden desk, bookshelves perfectly arranged, drawers all locked. I found a small key in a side cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a black folder labeled HW Holdings. I opened it. Inside was an investment contract with Adam's signature, naming him strategic advisor for Harbor West Holdings. There were also printed emails between him and someone identified only as R.M. about medical grant packages and confidentiality fees. One email read, "Transfer complete. Ensure the patient does not file a complaint. Keep the surgical records sealed." The date was just over a year ago, weeks after rumors spread about a failed surgery at the hospital, a case that was never made public. I photographed everything with my phone, carefully putting it all back. My hands were damp with sweat as I left the room. That evening at dinner, I casually asked, "What's Harbor West Holdings?" I saw the name on some papers. Adam glanced up, a flicker of caution in his eyes before his face smoothed over. "Just a small investment. Nothing to do with you." I smiled faintly, pretending to believe him, but inside my suspicion had solidified into determination. The next day, Laura helped me contact a financial investigator who had worked for the FBI, a man named Mark Dalton. We met him at a quiet cafe. Mark listened to my story, examined the photos of the documents, and said, "This isn't just a sign of money laundering. It could be tied to medical bribery. If that's the case, Adam is committing a federal crime." He explained that the Harbor West payments might be hush money to keep a hospital or individuals silent about malpractice. With Adam's position, That meant he could be directly involved in covering up the truth. I sat there, holding my cooling coffee, my chest heavy. The man I had trusted completely hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he might have built an entire hidden life on money and lies. Mark advised, "You need to keep gathering evidence. Don't let him suspect you know. Everything must stay under wraps until it's strong enough for court or federal investigators." That night, when Adam came home, I still cooked dinner, still asked about his day. But in my mind I was already mapping out a plan, every transfer, every contract, every connection. And I knew each step forward would bring me closer to the truth he was desperate to bury. Later that night, when Adam went out to a work party, I stayed home alone in his office. The heavy wooden door closed behind me, the soft click of the lock sounding like a silent vow to myself that tonight I wouldn't just tidy drawers or dust shelves. I opened every cabinet, every drawer. Beneath a stack of financial files, I found a green folder with frayed edges, labeled IVF, Miller, Bennett, Confidential. My heart pounded. This was our in vitro fertilization file from 15 years ago, a time filled with tears and hope, a chapter I thought I'd tucked away in peace. I sat down and carefully opened it. The first page was the application form, signed by both Adam and me. But as I turned the pages, I noticed something strange. Many sections had been crossed out and replaced with new typed text. The field for father's sperm sample had a thin sheet of paper glued over it, faintly revealing letters underneath. I took a small pair of tweezers from the desk drawer and gently peeled it back. Under the adhesive, the original text read, "Sperm sample, Adam Bennett." But on the paper glued over it, it said, "Sperm sample, donor #451E7. My stomach dropped. Donor meaning an anonymous donor. I kept flipping through the test records. One note in red read, "Specimen replaced due to genetic risk per request of patient's spouse." The signature in the confirmation section was Adam's. I set the pen down and sat frozen for several minutes, feeling as if the air had been sucked from the room. Memories flooded back, our long waits for test results, the tears after failed IVF cycles, the embraces Adam gave me as if we were sharing the same grief. All of it suddenly twisted into something unrecognizable. I need an answer. The next morning, I called an old friend who worked in the medical field to ask if anyone from the clinic back then was still around. She mentioned Dr. Lucas Grant, the physician who had overseen part of our procedure and had since taken early retirement. I found his number and left a message. Just a few hours later he called back, his voice low and cautious. "Sarah, I figured one day you'd reach out. We should meet somewhere quiet." We arranged to meet at a small cafe in the suburbs. Dr. Grant walked in with silver hair and a slightly slowed gait, but his eyes were still sharp. After a few polite exchanges, I placed the files straight on the table. "I found this in Adam's office. Can you explain it to me?" He opened the file, flipped a few pages, then looked up. "You're familiar with Huntington's disease, aren't you?" I nodded, my throat tightening. Huntington's, a cruel inherited neurological disorder that slowly kills brain cells, causing loss of motor control and cognitive decline, with no cure. Adam carries the gene, Dr. Grant said slowly. It's dormant, but the chance of passing it on to a child is 50%. When you two went through IVF, I prepared the normal procedure, using his sperm sample. But just before the collection day, Adam met with me privately and requested to replace it with an anonymous donor's sperm. He claimed he wanted to protect the child from the risk of inheriting it. I stared at him. "You're saying, my children are not biologically Adam's?" He nodded. "That's right." I objected, because this required consent from both partners. "But Adam told me you already knew and had agreed." He signed the confirmation and I stayed silent. I was wrong not to contact you directly. My head buzzed, my hands gripping the coffee cup so tightly the plastic nearly bent out of shape. "Why didn't you tell me? For 15 years. Dr. Grant's eyes grew heavy. I was bound by the clinic's confidentiality agreement, and I chose to stay quiet. But I regretted it. Part of the reason I left was because I couldn't stand how they ignored patients' rights. I opened my purse and took out a photo of my 3 children. They're my whole world. What will they think if they ever find this out?" He was silent for a moment, then said. The truth can hurt, but sometimes it has to be told to protect the future. Adam wasn't wrong in wanting to avoid the genetic risk. But he was completely wrong in taking away your right to choose. I left the cafe feeling both hollow and furious. On the way home, I stared at the gray sky, wondering how many other decisions Adam had made for me. How many truths he had hidden behind the image of the perfect husband. When I got home, I went into the kids' room. They were doing homework, pencils, scratching softly against the paper. Looking at their innocent faces, my heart clenched. They had no idea that the story of their family had been altered before they were even born. That night, Adam came home late. As he hung his coat, I stood at the living room doorway and asked bluntly, "Were you ever going to tell me about Huntington's disease and the fact that our kids aren't biologically yours?" Adam froze, then his eyes turned cold. "Who told you that?" "I found the file. I met with Dr. Grant." He gripped his briefcase strap, his voice lowering. "I did it to protect the kids. You should be grateful instead of blaming me." I stepped closer, looking straight at him. "Protect them? Or protect your own image so no one would know a respected doctor carries a genetic disease?" Adam turned away without answering. That silence was worse than any denial. And I knew if I wanted the whole truth, I'd have to find it myself piece by piece before he buried it any deeper. Dr. Grant handed me a thick envelope containing a neatly typed list. Each line had the name of a couple who had undergone IVF at the clinic that year, along with phone numbers or addresses. His eyes held both determination and concern. "Sarah, many of them have no idea. You have to be prepared. Once you start digging, there's no turning back." I nodded, feeling the weight but also a surge of resolve. I couldn't just think of myself anymore. If Adam and the clinic's director had done this to me, they had likely done it to others too. I began calling the numbers one by one. Some didn't answer. Some picked up but refused to talk. But there were also trembling voices, hesitant at first, then breaking as I mentioned sample changes without patient knowledge. The first family I met in person was the Daniels. We sat in their small living room, walls covered with photos of their twin boys, about 10 years old. Mrs. Daniels said they had struggled for years to have children, finally succeeding through IVF at that clinic. "When the boys were born, we didn't think much of it," she said, her fingers nervously tracing her teacup. "But as they grew, people started asking why they had features that didn't match either of us." "Mr. Daniels added, his voice dropping, "We once did genetic testing for one of them to check for allergies. The results showed no biological relation to me. At the time we couldn't understand why and didn't dare tell anyone." Other stories were just as heartbreaking. The Lewis family had a 7-year-old daughter with a rare blood disorder. "We once asked the clinic if they thoroughly screened the samples before implantation," Mr. Lewis said. "They told us everything was perfect. But now we know everything might have been arranged from the start." Each story I heard was like another piece of a bigger puzzle, a picture Adam and his superiors had painted for their own purposes, ignoring the trust and rights of their patients. Dr. Grant then arranged for me to meet Linda Foster, a nurse who had left more than 5 years ago. We met at a small diner by the river. Linda was in her 50s, slim but sharp-eyed. She brought an old, worn handbag with her, and inside were weathered notebooks. "I kept everything," Linda said as she set the stack on the table. "They thought I destroyed them when I left, but I didn't. I knew one day they'd be needed." I opened the first notebook. Pages were crammed with writing dates, times, patient names, and notes on procedures. Many entries had a small red dot in the corner with the words "sample changed, no consent." Next to it was Adam's signature, or sometimes that of the clinic director. I looked up at Linda. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried," she said bitterly. "I reported it to the medical board, to the hospital's board of directors. But everything just disappeared. No one wanted to go against them. Adam had the reputation, the deep connections, and the director had the money. I was just a nurse, my voice meant nothing." Linda pointed to an entry dated the same time I had my IVF. "This is your case." Adam requested the sample change, citing high genetic risk. "There's no consent form from you anywhere." I took a deep breath, gripping the notebook. Anger rose in me, but I forced myself to stay composed. Would you be willing to testify? She was silent for a few seconds before nodding. If you truly want to bring the truth to light, I'll help. But it has to be done carefully. They won't just sit back. We spent over 2 hours with Linda explaining how the clinic operated, how records were altered, how samples were switched, and a list of staff who knew but stayed silent. She even showed me how to identify Adam's real signature, and when he had signed for others. On the way home, I held the bag with the notebooks close, feeling like I carried the key to a massive door. A door that, once opened, would expose not just Adam, but an entire network of power and money. That night, when Adam came home, he had no idea that just a few blocks away, I had sat with one of the most crucial witnesses. He smiled, casually asked about my day, then buried himself in his phone. I answered in short, neutral phrases, hiding the storm quietly gathering inside me. I knew from that moment, I was no longer alone. The stories of the Daniels family, the Lewis family, and Linda's diary entries would be the foundation that allowed me to go further. And with each step forward, I would get closer to stripping away the facade Adam had built for so many years. I decided to hire a private investigator to look into Emily. The man who took the job was Jack Harris, a retired police investigator with a lean build, sharp eyes, and a slow but steady voice. We met in a small cafe downtown, where the background noise was just enough to cover the details of our conversation. What do you want to know about Emily Carter? Jack asked, flipping open his notebook. Everything. Her past, her family, where she lives, her relationships. And if there's anything connected to Adam, I want to know right away. I replied, never taking my eyes off him. Jack nodded. All right. But I'll warn you some things, once you hear them, you can't go back to the way things were. 3 days later, Jack called me to meet again at the same cafe. He set a thick file in front of me, clipped together. This story isn't simple. I opened the file. On the first page was a copy of Emily's birth certificate. Mother's name, Margaret Hayes. Date of death, April 12, 8 years ago. Cause of death, complications during heart surgery. Lead surgeon, Adam Bennett. I looked up, my heartbeat quickening. This is... Jack nodded. Margaret Hayes was Adam's patient. The hospital records say she died from a rare complication, not related to malpractice. But I found an old statement from a nurse who was there that day. According to her, Adam performed the surgery while severely sleep-deprived, after spending the weekend partying in Chicago. I turned the pages. There were photos of the surgical record, handwritten notes from the nurse about Adam fumbling during sutures, taking much longer than expected, and the patient losing too much blood. There was even an internal report stamped confidential with a recommendation for an investigation, later crossed out with the hospital director's signature. Emily was Margaret's only daughter, Jack continued. She was just 20 when her mother died. Her father had passed away a few years before, so her mother was everything. That loss shattered her. I believe she either found out the truth or at least suspected Adam. I sat still for a moment, feeling both horror and bitterness. So Emily approached Adam for revenge? At first it seems that way, Jack said. She got a job at the hospital, in Adam's department. She was dedicated, careful, earned his trust. But according to my source, a little over a year ago, they actually became romantically involved. The line between her revenge plan and a real relationship blurred. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the pages. In my mind, I saw Emily standing in the Silver Crown Hotel that day, eyes sharp and unreadable. So, from the start, she had another motive when she went near Adam. Jack leaned forward. Miss Sarah, I don't know what you'll do with this information. But clearly, you and Emily are both victims, each in your own way. You were betrayed and robbed of your right to choose motherhood. She lost her mother to a surgery that should have been safe. That night, I sat in my office, the desk lamp casting a small pool of light over Jack's file. The events intertwined, forming a warped portrait of Adam, the man I once believed to be the embodiment of responsibility and ethics. I started to wonder, if Emily truly wanted revenge, why had she let her relationship with Adam go so far? Was she playing a long game, or had she been pulled into a spiral of her own making? A few days later, the chance to see Emily again came sooner than I expected. On a Friday afternoon, I took my daughter to the hospital for her routine blood test. Walking down the hallway, I saw Emily at the admissions desk. She was in blue scrubs, hair neatly tied back, talking to another doctor. When our eyes met, a flicker of surprise crossed hers, but she quickly composed herself. "Hello, Sarah," she said evenly. I walked closer. "You know, I'm not the type to dance around things. We should talk." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "Not here. But, tomorrow night, Blue Harbor, 7 o'clock. I think you'll want to hear what I know." I nodded and left with my daughter. But all that evening, my mind stayed fixed on that meeting. Blue Harbor was a small riverside bar, much quieter than the ones downtown. When I walked in, Emily was already seated at a corner table, a glass of sparkling water in front of her. She gestured for me to sit. "I'm sure your investigator told you a few things," she began, eyes never leaving mine. "Yes, I'm Margaret Hayes's daughter. And yes, I approached Adam to make him pay. But things didn't go the way I thought." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "At first, I wanted him to fall for me, trust me, and then I'd take everything from him. But Adam wasn't just the arrogant man I pictured. He also knew how to make people believe in him even when it was all lies." Emily gave a bitter smile. "I knew he killed my mother, yet I still let myself get pulled in." I asked, "So now? What do you plan to do?" Emily looked out the window, where the streetlights shimmered on the water. "I'm not sure anymore. Part of me still wants revenge. But I've seen another side of him. And I don't know if I have the strength to keep playing this game." I set my hand on the table, meeting her gaze. "Emily, you and I have both lost things we can't get back. You lost your mother. I lost the truth about my own family. We can keep letting him control the game, or we can work together to end it." She turned back, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She didn't answer right away, just gave a small nod, as if the idea had planted a seed in her mind. And I knew, if she agreed, Adam wouldn't just be facing one angry woman but two. I knew I couldn't bring Adam down without the law on my side. After meeting Emily, I went to see Mark Dawson, a federal agent with over 10 years of experience investigating medical fraud and corruption in hospital systems. We met in his small office on the third floor of an old government building, where the light streamed in through narrow windows, catching the dust in the air. I laid out everything I had: financial records, bank statements, photos of Harbor West Holdings documents, Linda's journal, the list of victim families, and especially the information about Adam's IVF tampering. Mark listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting quick notes. When I finished, he was silent for a few seconds before saying, "What you have is strong, but to get a conviction in court, we need two more things. 1, a direct admission from Adam, and 2, a complete financial evidence trail linking him to the fraud and the cover-up." I clenched my hands. "I can do that. I know how to make him say it." The following weeks, I lived two parallel lives. By day, I worked, cared for my child, and spoke to Adam as if everything were normal. By night, I combed through documents, coordinated with Mark, and arranged secret meetings. I deliberately steered conversations with Adam toward sensitive topics when he was least guarded after dinner, or while sipping whiskey in the living room. One evening, when Adam mentioned taking the kids for regular checkups, I asked casually, "Do you think the kids could inherit anything from you?" He raised an eyebrow, setting his glass down. "I had them tested a long time ago, they're fine." I feigned surprise. "You had them tested? When? Why didn't I know?" "I'm a doctor, Sarah. I know what needs to be done to make sure my kids are healthy. Not everything is something you need to know." That line, both arrogant and careless, was exactly what I needed. The small recorder hidden in my coat pocket captured every single word. When I handed the recording file to Mark, he listened all the way through and nodded. "Perfect. This is a direct admission of conducting testing without your consent. Combined with the IVF records, we have a critical link." Next came the financial angle. Under Mark's guidance, I secretly copied data from the hard drive in Adam's computer where he stored reports for so-called investments through Harbor West Holdings. Some files had harmless names like medical conference budget or research funding, but when opened, they were all spreadsheets of money transfers to offshore accounts. with notations tied to internal settlements. One evening, Mark spread out a financial connection map on the table. See here. From Adam's account, the money goes into Harbor West, then moves to the Cayman Islands, then cycles back through Switzerland. This is the classic route for money laundering and bribery. Once the hospital board sees this map, they won't be able to ignore it. We agreed to present all the evidence to the board on the night of the hospital's anniversary gala, the biggest event of the year, where Adam would be honored as physician of a lifetime. Mark would arrange for the police to be at the hotel, ready to move in once they got the signal. To prepare, I reached out to Emily. Although I still had many doubts about her motives, I knew she could help. I asked her for any emails or messages Adam had sent that related to finances or manipulating surgeries. A week later, Emily secretly handed me a flash drive containing a chain of emails between Adam and the hospital director, discussing ensuring no complaints and protecting the department's reputation. I passed everything to Mark. When he finished reviewing it, his eyes lit up with satisfaction. This is the final piece. As the gala approached, I focused on every detail. The dress I chose wasn't overly glamorous but gave me confidence. My hair was neatly pinned up, and in my clutch, I kept a copy of our children's DNA results as the final blow. On the afternoon of the event, Mark called to confirm. The board will meet privately before the gala. I'll present all the evidence. Once they agree to act, the police will be stationed at all exits. All you have to do is keep Adam in the ballroom until the signal comes. I stood before the mirror, looking at the woman staring back at me. No longer the Sarah from months ago, confused, hurt, and powerless. Now a different Sarah, calm and ready for every step ahead. When I walked into the hotel ballroom that night, the air buzzed with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the glow of chandeliers. Adam stood near the stage, shaking hands with colleagues, his face lighting up when he saw me. He probably thought I was there to watch him be honored, and that was exactly what I wanted him to believe. I smiled, walked over, offered a brief congratulatory remark, then moved away to chat with a few other doctors' wives. Meanwhile, Mark and the board members began their private meeting in a nearby room. I knew once they saw the evidence, everything would start to unravel. About half an hour later, Mark appeared at the doorway of the ballroom, giving me a subtle nod. It was time. I glanced back at Adam, who was still engrossed in conversation, unaware that in just minutes, the entire world he'd built would collapse in front of hundreds of people. And I was ready to witness that moment. After the gala ended, Adam and Emily left the ballroom in high spirits. I kept my distance, watching them step into a luxury car and head toward downtown. Mark had already told me their destination, a high-end French restaurant on the top floor of a hotel, the same place Adam once took me to celebrate his promotion to department head. I arrived about 20 minutes later. The restaurant lobby still carried its classic style, warm golden lighting, and the soft sound of a piano. The manager recognized me, greeted me politely, and led me straight to a window table where Adam and Emily sat. A pricey bottle of red wine was open, both glasses half empty. Adam looked up first. His smile froze, replaced by an irritated glare. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I set my purse on the empty chair, pulling out a neatly bound cream-colored folder. "Just wanted to say congratulations," I said slowly, placing the folder squarely on the table between their glasses. Emily glanced at it, then at me, her brow furrowing slightly. Adam kept a composed face, but his fingers began tapping lightly on the table. "What's this?" "Evidence," I replied. "Of everything." He gave a dry laugh. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I opened the folder, letting each page catch the light DNA test results confirming he wasn't the biological father of any of our children. Copies of altered IVF records. The recording of him admitting he'd tested the kids without my knowledge. And the financial connection map tracing his accounts through Harbor West Holdings to offshore funds. I spoke each word clearly, my eyes locked on his. "Margaret Hayes died on your operating table because you were sleep-deprived after a weekend of partying. Records were falsified to avoid an investigation. You swapped out our sperm sample to hide the Huntington's disease you carry, taking away my right to choose. You embezzled hospital funds, laundered money through a shell company, and used it to settle potential lawsuits. It's all here." Emily straightened in her seat, her expression tightening at the mention of her mother's name. Adam gave her a quick glance before turning back to me. You think a few pieces of paper will bring me down? His voice tried to stay calm, but I could hear the tension in every syllable. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. You'll have to explain that to them. As soon as I finished speaking, the restaurant doors opened. Mark Dawson walked in with two plainclothes officers, followed by the manager. The atmosphere shifted instantly, conversations dwindled to silence. Dr. Adam Bennett. Mark's voice carried clearly. You are under arrest for medical fraud, embezzlement, falsifying patient records, and multiple other federal offenses. You have the right to remain silent, and the right to an attorney. Anything you say can be used against you in court. Adam shot to his feet, his chair toppling back. You have no right. He didn't finish before one officer stepped forward and cuffed his hands behind his back. Emily shrank back, her face pale, fingers tightening around her wine glass. Sarah. Adam's voice dropped, tinged with panic. You planned this? I stood, smoothing my dress. Not for days. For months. And every single day, you gave me another reason to do it. They led Adam past the dining tables, under the shocked, whispering stares of other patrons. As the door closed behind him, I turned to Emily. She was still seated, eyes lowered to the open folder on the table. I didn't know about the kids, she said softly. I thought I knew Adam, but it turns out. I believe you, I replied. Your mother deserves to know the truth. And so do my children. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Emily stood, picked up her handbag. I'm leaving the city. I need a different start. I only nodded. The following weeks were a whirlwind. News of Adam's arrest spread across the media. Major networks covered the IVF fraud, the embezzlement of hospital funds, and the concealment of medical errors. The hospital had to immediately launch a wide-scale investigation, suspending numerous doctors and staff involved. Adam's medical license was revoked on the spot. The court froze all assets in his name, including those hidden overseas. My lawyer worked with the authorities to recover the legal funds for our family. Part of it was placed into a trust for the children, ensuring they would not be affected financially. I was granted full custody. Adam's visitation rights were severely limited, and he now faced multiple long court trials. As for me, at first I thought I would just want to close the door on everything, to walk away from anything connected to the hospital. But then Mark introduced me to a newly established medical ethics committee, created to review IVF procedures and protect patient rights. They invited me to join as an advisor representing families who had experienced medical misconduct. I accepted. On my first day walking into the meeting room, I saw Dr. Lucas Grant already seated, smiling in greeting. Linda also joined as a witness and procedural expert. Together, we began a new mission, not only to repair what had gone wrong, but to prevent people like Adam from repeating the same deceit. One late night, after a long meeting, I came home. The children were already asleep. I stood at the doorway of their bedroom, the soft glow of the nightlight falling across their peaceful faces. In that moment, all the noise of the outside world seemed to disappear. 15 years of living in lies had come to an end. I knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but at least now, I could live in truth and in my own freedom. Everyone who hears this story will likely have their own feelings and thoughts. Some may see it as an unforgivable betrayal. Others may focus more on the power of truth and how it changes everything. And you, if you were in my place, would you choose to stay silent to preserve a facade, or stand up and expose everything, knowing a storm was coming? I believe that sometimes, facing the truth isn't just about seeking justice for yourself, but about protecting others from the same pain. A family is not only built on love, but also on respect and honesty. Once that foundation is broken, the only thing we can do is rebuild it on something stronger. If you want to keep walking alongside me, hearing real-life stories where every choice carries a deep lesson about family, love, and courage, follow this channel so you won't miss what comes next. Who knows, the next story might touch a corner of your own life that feels all too familiar.